Okay, we've got our about dialog, but there's no content in it. Let's go ahead and actually start putting something in it. So let me close this, switch to my about dialog, and let's start by adding some text. Our user needs to know what the name of our application is, so I'm going to use a text block, drag it out on my artboard, and just type the name of my game. Now that's kind of small, so let's go ahead and update that. And I think 36 points should be good enough. There we go. Now, I want to do a little bit more with this text. I'm going to convert it to a path. You remember earlier we were able to convert a rectangle or an ellipse to a path so we can modify the individual geometry. I can go ahead and select the subselect tool, but I obviously can't make any changes to a piece of text like this yet. But when I go to the Object menu, go to Path, and convert this to a path, now you'll see all the adorners come up, and I can actually manipulate the individual geometry of my pieces. Let me zoom in so you can see what I'm talking about a little bit better. So now, just like I did with a rectangle, I can go ahead and manipulate the geometry of my text to go ahead and make it look however I want. In addition, these are path elements, which have a little more flexibility in how I want them to appear. So let's go over to my Appearance panel, and let's go ahead, I'm going to change the fill to red, and I'm actually going to give them a solid stroke. So now my text jumps out a little bit better as text with a particular border and everything like that. I'm going to take this one step further and be able to pull the elements apart. If you look at my object tree, right now I have a single path element. This one path element is a compound path that contains all of the geometry for all of my letters. Now I want to pull that apart so that I can interact with each of the letters individually. I'm going to do this similar to what we did with the combine operations. I'm going to release the compound path. You'll find that under Object Path. Now let's look at what happened. Each one of my letters became its own piece, but something odd happened to the O, the D, the A, and the E. What happened is, since those letters have separate pieces, each of the individual path segments became its own path, which means the path that marks the inside of the O was disconnected from the path that marks the outside of the O. When these two were separated, now I have a solid shape instead of the hollow shape that I actually want. Let me click outside my region, select here, and you can see in the timeline that now I've selected both of the paths that make up the O. I'm going to go back to my path operations, and I'm going to actually make a compound path out of these. This combines the inside with the outside again, and I end up with the shape that I want. Let me do that with the other letters too. Each one of my letters, regardless of how many pieces it's been broken into, as long as I select all the pieces and make a compound path out of them, it'll reconnect them to get the letter that I want. There. Now if you look over in the object tree, I have exactly 8 paths, which represent all 8 letters of my object.